to sort of simplify it down, but it doesn't really work because they're still very complicated. So when you get a question with complicated diagrams, essentially just write out the story and don't stress too much about the complicated diagrams. Here's our version of the diagrams, which is a damn sight simpler. So p-n junction, the n-type semiconductors have got these extra electrons kind of floating at the top in the conduction band. The external voltage then pushes these up and onto the conduction band of the p-type semiconductor. They then fall down through the positive holes in the valence band of the p-type semiconductor, and if that if that size of energy fall is big enough, then the energy is given out in a photon of light. So this is called band theory. So what points do you need to talk about? You need to say, where is this energy coming from? Well, the energy is given to the n-type conduction band electrons by this external source of voltage. So because this is called band theory, you need to name the bands and also talk about which of the semiconductor types the band you are referring to is. So we are starting by referencing the conduction band of the n-type. So these extra electrons then move to the p-type. What band? Well, the conduction band of the p-type. What then happens? Well, the electrons move down to the p-type valence band, positive holes, releasing a photon of light. So the story is, where does the energy come from? Then talk about the journey of the electrons, making reference to the bands and whether it's n or p-type, and then say, well, so what? And the so what in this case is that a photon of light is released. This is showing you the other use of a p-n junction, and this is something called a photodiode. Now, a photodiode is how solar cells work, or solar panels, and you know that a solar panel has light energy coming in, and the solar panel is a source of voltage, and then you can use that solar panel to do stuff like boil a kettle. So remember, we're saying if you have a p-n junction and it's not connected to anything, then some of the electrons in the n-type drift into the positive holes and just sit there, and as a result of the separated positive and negative side, you actually have a little voltage there already. So what happens if you have a p-n junction and you expose it to light is that photons come in and they jump those extra electrons which are sat in the positive holes, they jump them back to the n-type side. So the n-type electrons and the p-type positive holes get pushed much further apart. Well, if the negative and positive ends gets pushed much further apart, then you have a much bigger voltage, and if you have a much bigger voltage, then you can do stuff with that. So for example, here's a solar cell and it's being powered, and it's being used to power a small motor. Maybe, I don't know if you've seen those hats with a sort of almost like novelty hats you can get on holiday. They've got a little solar panel at the top, and then there's a little inbuilt really small fan in the peak of the cap. So that might be the circuit diagram for that. So the photovoltaic story, if you're asked about this, is called photovoltaic because it means photons come in, and as a result of the photons come in, the p-n junction has a voltage across it. So photovoltaic. So again, talk about the energy. Well, incoming photons jump out the electrons. So the incoming photons, that's talking about where the energy comes from. So incoming photons. Now let's talk about the journey of the electrons, and we must also make reference to the bands and whether we are talking about the p-type or the n-type. So incoming photon jumps out electrons. Well, where from? Well, the p-type, and it's the p-type positive holes, in the valence band, because remember the positive holes are in the valence band of the p-type. Okay, so these electrons are jumped out of the p-type valence band positive holes. What then happens to them? Well, the electrons are then moved to the n-type semiconductor. Now, where do electrons hang out in the n-type semiconductor? They hang out in the conduction band. So electrons move to the n-type semiconductor conduction band. And the final thing is, well, so what? What do we get out of it? Well, in this case we get a voltage out of it, so this creates a voltage. And that was electricity, troops. I hope you enjoyed. Bye for now.